Resident Evil has been one of the most popular franchises in the horror genre, inspiring many classics that we know and love today. As popular as Resident Evil is today, we must go back in time. We must go back to 1989 to a title called Sweet Home. Sweet Home was a game that was published by Capcom, which was a survival horror that surrounded a group of filmmakers exploring a haunted mansion and encountering paranormal enemies. This game would be a big inspiration for Resident Evil. The game was a Japanese exclusive, released for the NES, which is probably why a lot of people don't know about it. Video game designer Shinji Mikami started working for Capcom in 1990, but didn't start production on his new horror adventure until 1993. Mikami originally wanted to remake Sweet Home, but it became more of a spiritual successor to the original. Another factor was that Capcom actually didn't have the rights to the plot of Sweet Home, so even if they wanted to remake it, they actually couldn't. The story would then be drastically changed with some remaining elements. The biggest change would have to be zombies. While Sweet Home used the idea just a little bit, it was Resident Evil that really played with that whole zombie aspect, instead of paranormal activity, which is ironic, since zombies play a huge part in the Resident Evil series as a whole. So good choice on Mikami's vision. Sweet Home was also adapted into a movie, known as the Mamiya House, which Shinji decided to take inspiration from. While creating Resident Evil, with Mikami paying homage to the main inspiration, adding set pieces and styles similar to the original game, plus an interesting story unveiling itself through details scattered around the game, Mikami wanted to make something new at the end of the day, and maybe revolutionary, some might say. On March 22nd, 1996, Resident Evil was released, and this game would go on to shape horror for years to come. This game sold more than 5 million copies and is the 17th best-selling PS1 game. With this success, the franchise was bound to get more titles ahead of it, and it did just that. The PS1 got a multitude of releases, including greatest hits editions and director's cuts. Some consider Resident Evil 2 to be the best Resident Evil, with the title holding the spot of the 14th best-selling game on the PS1, with over 5 million copies sold as well. To this day, Resident Evil is Capcom's best-selling franchise, which is insane given that it's a horror game. Eventually, a console called the GameCube would be released in 2001. Resident Evil 2 and 3 were then ported to the GameCube, but some people argued that these ports were not really worth the purchase, given the fact that the games were just ports of the original and weren't all that long. The first Resident Evil also had not aged that well, and having it on the GameCube was unnecessary for the time. GameCube had banked on popular games such as Zelda and Mario, but didn't have a crazy library of mature and horror games. In 2002, Capcom would then release a brand new remade port of Resident Evil and a new title called Resident Evil 0, which takes place simultaneously with 1. Capcom would release a port of Resident Evil Code Veronica in the next year, adding an X to its name and some extra cutscenes. The last RE game we would see on the GameCube was RE4, which completely changed the franchise. But for now, we must start with the remake that changed it all, Resident Evil. The game starts off with most of the main characters we see in the game in a helicopter, flying through Raccoon City's forest in 1998. After recent bizarre cases of brutal murders being conducted by people who weren't human, Special Ops Bravo and Alpha Team, STARS, is sent out to investigate. When the Bravo team goes silent, that's when we find out that something actually bizarre happened. Zombie dogs had ripped the flesh out of the members, chewing their bodies away. As the main character, Jill Valentine, stumbles across one of the bodies, she quickly loses her feet and falls to the ground. The secondary main character, Chris Redfield, quickly comes to the rescue to shoot one of the dogs and pick Jill up. After Jill and Chris start running through the forest frantically for their lives. Unfortunately, the helicopter pilot Brad gets scared and takes off, leaving the members behind. The dogs continue to catch up, and as Chris is about to take one for the team, another STARS member, Albert Wesker, shows up at the perfect time and saves the day. As the three run, they see a mansion that they believe to take shelter in as the storm passes. But little do they know, they'll be entering survival horror. The main premise of this game is really to explore the Spencer Mansion and uncover its secrets within its walls. Resident Evil by far has one of the best openings to a video game ever. Not only is it extremely engaging, but it gives the player enough information to understand the basis of what's going on, while completely being unaware of what's actually going on. Not only that, but the CGI cutscenes look absolutely stunning and hold up very well. That also goes for in-game cutscenes, which are not CG, but the cool part is that those bonus costumes will work during those cutscenes, for the HD remaster at least. The game allows you to play as Chris or Jill before starting, but the practical option would be Jill for starters. We'll get more on that later. As Jill enters the mansion, we notice that Wesker and another STARS member, Barry, are with her, but Chris is nowhere to be found. After noticing this, Jill wants to go outside, but that's not the best option. Jill and Barry explore one mansion side, while Wesker explores another one alone. Jill and Barry enter a creepy and dark dining hall. This is where you finally take control of your character, and you're able to move around the hall. As we move further down, we find somebody's blood on the floor. Jill decides to investigate, and we are met with one of the most iconic things in gaming, a zombie devouring one of the STARS members, as it slowly turns its head around. This is where the players finally realize that this mansion might have more to it than it seems. The first thing to highlight about this game is its beautiful scenery and graphics. The first three RE games had pre-rendered backgrounds, but as you know, the PS1 came way before the GameCube, and this console was way more powerful than the PS1. This allowed the team to use the GameCube to the max and to their advantage. The 3D renders look absolutely stunning to this day. That and combining small 3D elements such as fire moving on a candle really sells this game completely. That's probably why the game holds up so well and sets a big standard for older games. Even RE4 doesn't look as good as this game does. When I ask people why they haven't played Remake, they usually respond with the fixed camera angle issue. Now, other games like Silent Hill 2 had tank controls, but those games featured moving cameras, whereas this game doesn't. The problem is that fixed camera angles make this game what it is, and is a very important part of its identity. A dying dynamic that made this game spark. Fixed camera angles implement another layer of fear. Now, of course, hardware limitation is the reason for this, but maybe that's a good thing. The cinematic shots in this game are beautiful to look at. The anticipation of waiting to find out what's around the next corner. These are not only better jump scares, but keep players on their toes without the need for a first-person perspective or cheap jump scares. One of my favorites would have to be this hall. Now, if you try to enter again, online discussions have extremely mixed views on whether or not fixed camera angles are fun to play with. However, I think it's best to always give things like this a try. Moving back to something I was previously talking about earlier, Resident Evil allows you to pick as either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. Playing as Jill is much easier, as your partner Barry gives you a lockpick at the start of the game. You also get 2 extra item boxes. The cons of Jill is that she takes damage easier. Chris is much harder, as he only gets a knife and a lighter at the start of the game. Chris also is alone, so he doesn't get a lockpick. This means that Chris must look for small keys to open doors and do more puzzles. That, and he only gets 6 item slots. One part of the game has Jill finding a shotgun, and as she exits the room, something goes wrong.
God, what did I do now? Wesker! Barry! Help!
Jill! You in there?
Barry? Get me out of here! The door's jammed!
Stand back! Grab my hand!
Barry.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
If you play as Chris, however, you'll have to find a broken shotgun to take the working one, or else you'll be squished to death. In terms of the story details, the game mostly plays out the same way. However, Barry is prevalent in Jill's storyline, and rookie Rebecca is prevalent in Chris's. In terms of our main STARS members, we have Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Albert Wesker, Rebecca Chambers, Richard Eichen, Forrest Speyer, and Enrico Marini. Some other characters in the game are mentioned but shown very little of, like Brad. This might sound funny, but something I love about this game is its lack of story. Yes, there is a story. However, it's not a story that really overshadows the gameplay. What I mean by this is that we grow to love these characters more by their actions than their actual personalities. As we move on to our weaponry, there are a good amount of weapons in this game. As far as the main weapons go, the classic pistol is good for a first-time player. It's a weapon I saw myself using less and less each playthrough though. There is an unlockable unlimited pistol that you acquire if you beat the game on normal in under 5 hours. You can also unlock the unlimited rocket launcher if you complete the game on normal in under 3 hours. The classic shotgun is a great gun for the first section of the game. It also does sick headshots too, so be sure to aim up perfectly. One thing I suggest is not reloading this gun with any new ammo coming your way on Jill's run. After meeting one of your partners, Richard, if you decide to save him, you will be able to get his shotgun, which has a bigger ammo capacity. The grenade launcher is another weapon that you can find in the game that belonged to another one of your partners, Forrest. Spoiler alert, he is found dead already, so it's best that you take the launcher and leave. If you decide to walk up the stairs and check what's back there, Forrest will get up and try to attack you. For some reason, Barry gives you some acid shells before you even obtain this weapon, which is pretty funny, but they're always useful for later, I guess. The Magnum is a gun that you get by unlocking a grave tomb with some pieces you find inside the mansion. The Magnum is a very strong gun. However, ammo for it can be pretty scarce. Some enemies are more prone to taking a lot of damage when using this gun, so I suggest you only use it for boss encounters. This is a slight spoiler, but if you play as Jill and choose to let Barry die, his gun is so powerful that at one of the final boss battles, you can kill the tyrant with one hit. The flamethrower is another good weapon that Chris can use while trying to defeat some enemies, but it's not a weapon I personally enjoy using as much. You also have self-defense items such as daggers and stun guns, which are very vital to the game when zombies try to attack you. Item boxes are scattered across the map in order to store all of your unwanted items or items you want to use for later. Always think before you pick certain items up, because you can't discard them. You must find a box to store them in. This is one of the best aspects of survival horror, as the player is constantly having to travel back and forth in rooms that they might only want to enter in once. Another thing to note is that this game has no autosave. Everything is manual save. The only way you can save is if you're near a typewriter and if you have ink ribbons. If you plan on playing on a harder level, I suggest you know where all of those save points and item boxes are so you don't have to keep restarting the game. The T-Virus allowed endless possibilities of mutations that could be implemented on animals and people. The classic zombie is the typical enemy that is super slow and lingers around most of the areas in the game. Not only that, but they love to linger around tight halls, so you have no choice but to shoot them or try your hardest to dodge them before they take a bite out of your neck. Other than the first zombie encounter, another iconic moment in this game is the bathtub zombie. The Crimson Head is one of the new additions to the game that was not featured in the original. After you kill a regular zombie without burning it, it will eventually turn into one of these things. The Crimson Heads are extremely fast and have sharp claws that will slash you. With the fast pace of these enemies, your anxiety only intensifies when you're running away from one of them, trying to dodge slower enemies in the same corridors. If you're looking to avoid these enemies completely, it's best to use your light and kerosene to keep them down for good. Cerberus are annoying ass zombie dogs. That's all I gotta say. Plant 42 is like a giant plant-like enemy that covers an entire room. It has long arms which hit you as you try to defeat it, similar to another plant that you encounter earlier in the game. It also throws hot mist at you, so it's best to move back and forth constantly in this room. Plant 42 can be skipped if you're playing as Jill. You're able to make this serum called the V-Jolt, which, by the way, is not fun to make, to kill the plant. If you're playing as Chris though, unfortunately you must fight this enemy. Hunters are some of the most iconic enemies in this game, and one that we luckily got to see in later games too. Hunters are one-shot, one-kill enemies. They perform extremely powerful attacks, but if you're lucky you'll get slashed with their close-up attack. They are fast and come up in the last few sections of the game. Best to run as quickly as you can when seeing these guys. Yawn is another big boss battle. A giant snake that could leave you poisoned if you're too close. Yawn is a snake that you fight twice, and is a fairly easy boss battle if you don't get too close. When you're playing against Yawn, be sure to look at Yawn's head so you can see which way he's going to go. Neptune is a giant shark that is very hungry when you arrive to meet him at his home, and his other little fellow sharks. Neptune is one of my favorite boss battles. While you're essentially not fighting him, you're on a timer before the tank's glass breaks, and, well, you'll become dinner. The Black Tiger is another anxiety attack enemy. How funny that this enemy's name is Tiger, being a spider. Tiger is not an enemy that you have to fight per se. You get stuck with two spiders in a room, Tiger and a baby. You need to use a knife to rip off spider webs from a door. The problem is that there are 5 webs and 2 spiders waiting in the back of you to spray poison all over your back. Lisa Trevor has by far the saddest backstory of an enemy in the RE series as a whole, an enemy that intrigued me to look into deeper. Lisa was mass experimented on at the Spencer Mansion and lost her parents through these experiments, chained to a bed as she was fed through an IV. All Lisa ever wanted to do was reunite with her mother, but since she was deemed useless to the research, her mother was gone and Lisa was left, all alone. Imposter parents were eventually sent for Lisa to help her believe that her mother was still around. Lisa wasn't dumb. This would eventually become an uproar, with Lisa taking the faces of her imposter parents to make a mask covering her face, with not much left of hers being on her body anymore. After being experimented on for over 30 years, Lisa finally finds the grave of her mother and jumps into decay. Chimeras are enemies that show up at the end of the game. They are these stalker-like enemies that hide in ducts or on top of walls. You can't see these enemies when hiding since the camera angles are fixed, which only adds to the level of fear for the next challenge you'll have to complete. The power is out and must be turned on, but you'll need to fill a capsule with gas. The area is filled with chimeras, by the way. When you receive the fully gassed up tank, you get a message saying that running with the tank will end in your death. The tension arises as you're slowly walking back up to the room filled with these enemies, praying that one of these doesn't jump down before you get to the tank area. It's extremely scary, but fun. Tyrant is the last boss on this list. Super spoilers coming up. This enemy is revealed to us by Wesker, the guy wearing sunglasses at night. Who could ever suspect that he was the villain? Tyrant is the ultimate powerhouse, being the first tyrant to be created by the Umbrella Corporation. This is where we find out that Wesker has been working with Umbrella to conduct such experiments at the Spencer Mansion. His plan to lure his team members into the mansion worked. Umbrella, the pharmaceutical company, is more than meets the eye, which we find out in later games of the series. The tyrant stands over 8 feet tall, with his heart penetrating out of his body, along with a gigantic claw for an arm. His powerful charged up attacks will leave you and your partner's body laying cold on the floor. A main highlight that surrounds the Resident Evil games would have to be its puzzles. As years went on, puzzles in the series eventually dwindled and showed up less and less. This game is reminiscent of what the old RE was, a mix of challenge and survival horror. Some of the standout puzzles would have to be the sword key puzzle, a room with a key. After picking up the key, the walls close in and half of the area gets blocked. As you turn your head to exit, a knight with a giant moving blade is slowly walking towards you. The only way you can stop it is if you place the key back in its place. Now obviously after testing out the waters, you'll understand that the only way to solve this puzzle is with another key. This by far would have to be one of my favorite puzzles in the game, as it's a great introduction for what's to come. The rest of the puzzles in the game, for the most part, are fairly simple, in a I'm not gonna be stuck on this for hours type of way. One dangerous zombie is an enemy that appears in the game after you beat it 4 times, 2 for Jill and 2 for Chris. The zombie is shown to be Forrest, one of the STARS members. This enemy will run fast, attached with a vest of bombs on him. This enemy cannot be turned off after it's on. Cutscenes will play out differently depending on how you enter a room or what you choose to skip.
Got cold feet already? That's not like you.
This is one of the reasons that this game must be played more than once to uncover all of its secrets. Real Survivor mode is the true challenge. After completing the game, you'll be able to play on Once Again mode. After completing the game on Once Again, you'll have the opportunity to play on Real Survivor. This mode is set to hard difficulty, does not have auto-aim, and the big kicker, the item boxes are not connected, which means you must go back to the box you left whichever item for. After Real Survivor, you have Invisible Enemy mode. This mode is invisible enemies. Pretty self-explanatory. You can see enemies through mirrors and through dust and water on the floor. If you're finally up for a challenge, I totally recommend trying this. You can get daggers back if you blow the enemy's head off clean. It doesn't always work, but it does sometimes. The closet key unlocks after you play the game, which is a key to a door in the game where you can change your character's outfit. In the HD remaster, you can do it in the main menu though. Last but not least, there are a million doors you must get through in this game. This is because at the time of the release, instead of loading screens, the team opted out for something better. Doors opening. In this case, you'll see a lot of them in your playthrough, but it gives you a quick second to breathe at least. While this game does feature a plethora of endings, something I can say is that they're not all that different from each other. The main components of all is whether or not you save or don't save certain characters, or if you let the mansion stay up or explode. Jill's best ending is saving Barry and Chris. Her worst is saving neither Barry nor Chris. Chris's best ending is saving Jill and Rebecca, while his worst is saving neither. There are more than 5+ endings, so it's always better to try something different on your playthroughs, like letting your partners die. The music in this game is so good. That beautiful save room theme. REmake is able to capture the ambience this game is going for perfectly. It's extremely memorable, with each song fitting into each section perfectly. The soundtrack really makes the atmosphere in this game creepy and mysterious, waiting to see what will jump out at you. 10 out of 10 soundtrack for this game, and probably one of the best in the series. Resident Evil Remake is a game that shines above all in the series. While it is a remake, it is seen in the community as a game of its own, one that you can love while appreciating the original side by side. It's a classic that will never get old and one that should always be respected.